Admiral Kate Mitchell drummed her fingers against the worn leather of her command chair, a habit she'd developed over 15 years of deep space service. The bridge of the U.S. Deception looked like something out of a historical museum, intentionally so. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, steam occasionally hissing through apparent leaks. Ancient LCD screens flickered with static, and the hull made ominous creaking sounds at regular intervals. Incoming scan, Admiral. Lieutenant Jack Cooper reported from his tactical station, which appeared to be held together with duct tape and hope. They're using standard electromagnetic protocols. Should I let them see the reactor core? Mitchell nodded, a slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Show them exactly what they're expecting to see, Lieutenant. Let's give them a nice, juicy target. The U.S. Deception was humanity's masterpiece of misdirection, a vessel designed to look like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and optimism. Every dent in its hull, every flaking paint patch, every stuttering engine signature had been carefully engineered to tell a story. The story of a species barely capable of interstellar travel. They're moving to surround us, Commander Sarah Ellis announced from navigation, her hands hovering over controls that looked salvaged from a 20th century submarine. 3 warships, Corvette-class by their energy signatures. They're not even trying to hide their approach vector. Mitchell watched the alien vessels on the main display, their sleek forms a stark contrast to the Deception's apparent decrepitude. The Zarkak ships gleamed like polished obsidian, their hull design screaming of technological superiority. They moved with the confidence of a species that had never known true challenge. Intercepting their internal communications, Lieutenant Cooper added, his eyes dancing with amusement. They're discussing whether we're worth salvaging for parts. Current consensus is that our technology is too primitive to be of any use. The bridge crew maintained their composure, but Mitchell could see the subtle signs of suppressed laughter. Chief Engineer Mike Roberts had outdone himself with the latest upgrades to their masking systems. The quantum core powering their ship was hidden behind layers of technological camouflage, masked to appear as a barely functioning fusion reactor. Multiple targeting locks, Commander Ellis reported. They're preparing to fire warning shots. Calculating their weapon yields now. Nothing we haven't seen before. Mitchell straightened in her chair. This was the delicate part. Status of our hull breach in Section 4. Ready to go, Admiral, Roberts replied through the comm. One hit near that section, and we'll give them a real pretty light show, complete with venting atmosphere and distress beacons. The first warning shot from the Zarkak's fleet streaked past their port side, a deliberate miss designed to demonstrate superior firepower. The Deception shuddered dramatically, internal systems creating the perfect illusion of a ship barely holding together. They're broadcasting, Admiral, Lieutenant Cooper announced. Standard first contact package. Lots of talk about peaceful intentions and technical assistance. They're offering to guide our species into a new age of enlightenment. He paused, reading further. And they've already started drawing up resource exploitation treaties. Mitchell nodded slowly, her expression hardening. This was why the Deception existed. Too many young species made the same mistake, assuming that technological differences equated to overall superiority. Humanity had learned the hard way that technology wasn't a linear path, that sometimes the simplest solutions were the most elegant. Begin Phase 2, she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of authority that had earned her this command. Let's show our new friends why humanity still teaches its children to use paper maps alongside quantum navigation. As her crew began their carefully choreographed dance of deception, Mitchell reflected on the wisdom that had led to the creation of ships like the Deception. Humanity had learned to keep its options open, to maintain multiple paths of development rather than pursuing a single line of advancement. It was a lesson they were about to share with the Zarkaks, whether the aliens were ready to learn it or not. The game was set. Now it was time to spring the trap. Commander James Anderson's translation software worked overtime, as another burst of Zarkak's communications filled the bridge speakers. Their tone had grown increasingly patronizing over the last hour, each message more condescending than the last. He exchanged an amused glance with Dr. Emily Foster, who was carefully monitoring the aliens' scanning attempts from her station. "My dear primitive vessels," the latest message began, making several bridge officers snort with barely contained laughter. "We cannot help but notice your ship's critical systems are operating far below acceptable safety parameters. For your own protection, we insist you power down and accept our guidance." Admiral Mitchell leaned forward in her chair. "Dr. Foster, what are our friends actually doing while they shower us with their concern?" "They're getting creative with their scans, Admiral," Foster replied, her fingers dancing across her console's deliberately archaic interface. "They've moved from basic electromagnetic to quantum resonance scanning, still finding exactly what we want them to see: a desperately overtaxed fusion core, structural stress fractures, and enough radiation leaks to make any safety inspector faint." Lieutenant Cooper chimed in from Tactical. "They're also moving their ships into a standard containment formation. Classic herding maneuver. They're trying to guide us toward their local space station." He paused, checking another reading. "And they're powering up their electromagnetic pulse arrays. Looks like they're planning to help us shut down our systems." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "Status of our honeypot systems." Chief Engineer Roberts' voice crackled through the comm, his southern drawl carrying a note of pride. "All set, Admiral. The dummy systems are ready to fail spectacularly on command. When they hit us with that EMP, they'll think they've knocked out everything but life support. Meanwhile, our real systems will be gathering data on their weapon signatures." The bridge fell silent as another Zarkak's message played through the speakers. This one was from their fleet commander, a self-important speech about the burden of uplifting primitive species and the glory of their confederation. Dr. Foster's instruments caught their scans intensifying during the transmission. "They're getting cocky," Commander Ellis observed from navigation. "Their formation is loosening. They're not even maintaining proper combat spacing anymore." Admiral Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. "They don't see us as a military threat. That's exactly where we want them." She turned to Anderson. "Commander, are you recording all of this for the diplomatic course?" "Every word, Admiral," Anderson confirmed. "The exonopsychologists are going to have a field day with this one. The Zarkaks match every predictive model for Type 3 interventionist species. They're following the playbook to the letter." Lieutenant Cooper's console suddenly lit up with new data. "Admiral, they're charging their main weapons arrays. Energy signatures suggest they're planning to target our engine section, probably hoping to disable us without causing too much damage to their potential salvage." "How thoughtful of them," Mitchell remarked dryly. "Dr. Foster, are you getting good readings on their weapon systems?" "Perfect ones," Foster replied with professional satisfaction. "Their overconfidence is making them sloppy with their security protocols. Every scan they send us is a two-way street, and they don't even realize it. I've already mapped most of their primary systems architecture. The ship's internal sensors detected the building energy of the Zarkak's weapons, but no one on the bridge showed any sign of concern. This was a dance they had performed before, each step carefully choreographed to teach overconfident species a valuable lesson about assumptions. "Incoming transmission," Anderson announced. "They're giving us one final warning before they render assistance, whether we want it or not." Admiral Mitchell straightened in her chair, her expression becoming serious. "All stations, prepare for Phase 3. Let's show our friends that sometimes the most dangerous technology is the one you don't recognize as technology at all." As the Zarkak's final warning echoed through the bridge, the crew of the Deception made their final preparations. They had played the part of primitive spacefaring species to perfection. Now it was time to spring the trap and demonstrate why humanity had become known throughout explored space as masters of the unexpected. The electromagnetic pulse from the Zarkak's fleet rippled through space like a silent thunder, aimed directly at the U.S. Deception's supposedly vulnerable systems. Lieutenant Cooper watched his tactical display with professional satisfaction as the alien weapon washed over their hull, accomplishing nothing more than giving their sensors an excellent reading of Zarkak's technology. Enemy EMP impact in 3, 2, 1. Cooper called out, then smiled. No effect, Admiral. They're charging for a second burst. Admiral Mitchell nodded to Chief Engineer Roberts on the main screen. Time to show them our first card, Mike. Initiate metamaterial transformation. With pleasure, Admiral, Roberts replied, his fingers dancing across his engineering console. Releasing outer hull configuration now, making it nice and dramatic for our audience. The Deception's exterior began to change. What had appeared to be weathered, patched metal plates suddenly rippled like liquid mercury. The transformation started at the bow and flowed backward, the ship's apparent decay melting away to reveal pristine quantum alloy armor beneath. The process was deliberately slow, designed to create maximum psychological impact. Getting some interesting reactions from our friends, Commander Anderson reported, monitoring the flood of panicked Zarkak's communications. Their sensor operators are having what I can only describe as a collective meltdown. A lot of accusations about sensor malfunctions. Dr. Foster's voice carried a note of professional pride. They're trying to get a read on our hull composition now. The quantum shifting pattern is giving their materials analysis fits. Every scan returns different results. Admiral Mitchell watched the alien vessels on the main display as they hastily reformed their battle formation. The casual arrogance of their previous positioning had vanished, replaced by textbook combat spacing. Cooper, are they ready to try something more aggressive? Yes, Mom. Detecting multiple weapon locks. They're spinning up their main particle beam arrays. Cooper's hands moved swiftly over his console. Permission to deploy point defense grid. Granted. Let's show them why we call it a defense grid. The Deception's previously smooth hull blossomed with activity. Hundreds of small ports opened like mechanical flowers, each revealing a precision defense turret. The systems had been there all along, hidden beneath the shape-shifting outer layer, waiting for this moment. The Zarkaks fired first. A full spread of particle beam weapons designed to disable the suddenly threatening human vessel. The space between the ships lit up as the Deception's point defense grid responded. Each incoming beam met a precisely calculated counterpulse, the energies canceling each other out in brilliant flashes of light. All attacks neutralized, Cooper reported calmly. Their weapon systems are operating exactly within expected parameters. Defense grid is adapting to their firing patterns. Commander Ellis spoke up from navigation. They're trying to maneuver for better firing positions. Their formation is getting sloppy again, this time from panic rather than overconfidence. Dr. Foster, Mitchell called out. Are you getting clean data on their propulsion systems? Crystal clear, Admiral. Foster responded, her eyes fixed on her readings. Their evasive maneuvers are giving us a perfect view of their engine configurations. The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating. Complex, but surprisingly inflexible. The Zarkaks launched another attack, this time coordinating their fire from multiple angles. The Deception's defense grid responded with the same efficient precision, neutralizing each threat while expending minimal energy. They're requesting emergency communication, Anderson announced, a touch of amusement in his voice. The translation software is having trouble keeping up with their panic, but they're demanding to know what we are. Admiral Mitchell stood from her command chair, straightening her uniform. The time for playing weak was over. Now it was time for the real diplomatic work to begin. Put me through on all channels, Commander. Let's explain to our friends why humanity has survived every first contact scenario we've ever encountered. As she prepared to address the Zarkak's fleet, Mitchell reflected that this was always her favorite part of these encounters, the moment when understanding dawned, when an overconfident species realized that true advancement wasn't about having the most powerful weapons, but about having the wisdom to use power responsibly. Commander Jessica Hayes sat in her dimly lit cyber warfare suite, surrounded by holographic displays showing streams of alien code. What had started as a trickle of data during the initial scans had become a flood as the Zarkak ships frantically tried to coordinate their responses to the Deception's transformation. Every transmission, every sensor sweep, every weapons lock had given her another way into their systems. "Admiral," Hayes called through the ship's comm, her fingers never stopping their dance across multiple interfaces. "Their network architecture is beautiful and completely vulnerable. They've never had to deal with a serious cyber attack. No internal partitions, no autonomous security systems, not even basic code authentication." Admiral Mitchell's voice came back clear and steady. "How long do you need?" "Already inside their command and control network," Hayes replied, a note of professional pride in her voice. "Remember those primitive radio signals we were broadcasting? Each one carried a dormant quantum virus. They'd been spreading through their systems since first contact, waiting for my signal." On the bridge, Lieutenant Cooper's tactical display suddenly blazed with new information as Hayes' systems began feeding him data directly from the Zarkak ships. "Getting full access to their tactical networks now, Admiral. We can see everything they're seeing, and a lot of things they're missing. Their engineers are starting to notice something's wrong," Hayes reported, her voice carrying the calm focus of someone in their element. "They're trying to lock down their systems, but they don't understand what they're fighting. Our quantum viruses don't follow the rules they're used to." Dr. Foster called out from her station. "Fascinating. Their entire technology base is built on quantum computing, but they never developed quantum encryption. They thought their systems were too advanced to be hacked by lesser species." The main screen showed the Zarkak ships beginning to move erratically as Hayes' code took hold. Their formation discipline broke down as ship after ship lost fine control over their navigation systems. "Executing Phase 2 of the cyber package," Hayes announced. At her command, every display screen on every Zarkak's vessel simultaneously lit up with the same message, written in their own language. "You fired first. Standard diplomatic protocols have failed. Initiating human first contact protocol. Defense pattern Delta." Commander Anderson couldn't help but smile as he monitored the aliens' communications. They're trying to coordinate a response, but every time they transmit, the viruses spread faster. Their command structure is breaking down. "Show them why we call it a defense pattern," Admiral Mitchell ordered. Hayes' fingers flew across her interfaces once more. One by one, the Zarkak ships began to lose power to their weapon systems. Not through any direct attack, but through their own safety protocols being turned against them. The viruses convinced their systems that they were experiencing critical overloads, forcing emergency shutdowns. "Their engineers are trying to override their safety systems," Hayes reported, almost sounding impressed. "They're good, but they're fighting their own code now. Every countermeasure they attempt just gives us more access." Dr. Foster's voice carried a note of scientific curiosity. "Their quantum processors are incredible, far more advanced than ours in pure processing power, but they never considered they might need to defend against something as simple as a logic attack. They're like a castle with high walls but no door." The bridge crew watched as the last Zarkak's weapon system went dark. Their ships now drifted in formation, all offensive capabilities neutralized without a single shot fired. "Final stage ready, Admiral," Hayes called out. "On your command, I can begin the educational protocol." Admiral Mitchell nodded, even though Hayes couldn't see her. Proceed, Commander. Let's show them what they've been missing. Hayes initiated the final sequence. Every computer system on the Zarkak ships began displaying a comprehensive technical history of human computing, from mechanical calculators to quantum processors, showing how each stage of development had built upon and enhanced the others rather than replacing them. Their engineers are watching, Hayes reported, satisfaction clear in her voice. And based on their communications, they're starting to understand. Sometimes, the best way to advance isn't to abandon the old ways, but to find new ways to use them. Admiral Mitchell smiled. The first stage of their mission was complete. Now came the real challenge. Teaching a lesson about humility without humiliating their new potential allies. The Zarkak's flagship's main weapon banks glowed with building energy, a last-ditch effort by their commander to salvage pride from their increasingly desperate situation. Lieutenant Cooper tracked the power buildup on his tactical display, his expression more curious than concerned. They're channeling everything they have left into their primary particle cannon, he reported. Looks like they've found a way to override some of Commander Hayes' safety protocols. Admiral Mitchell exchanged a knowing look with Dr. Foster. Doctor, are the quantum sync arrays ready? Perfectly aligned, Admiral, Foster responded, her fingers making minor adjustments to her controls. The arrays are calibrated to the exact frequency of their weapon signature. I must say, their particle cannon technology is remarkable, just remarkably predictable. The Zarkak's weapon fired, a brilliant lance of energy that cut through space toward the deception. Instead of attempting to dodge or block the attack, the human ship seemed to welcome it. As the beam struck, the quantum sync arrays activated, their surface rippling like the surface of a pond. Energy capture at 98% efficiency, Chief Engineer Roberts announced over the comm. Beautiful clean power, too. These folks may be arrogant, but they sure know how to build a particle accelerator. The captured energy flowed through the deception systems, actually strengthening their shields and powering up secondary systems. On the bridge displays, the crew could see the shock and disbelief radiating through the Zarkak's fleet as their ultimate weapon had not only failed, but had actually made their opponent stronger. Dr. Foster's analysis came through, her voice carrying a mix of professional admiration and pity. Their entire technological philosophy is based on linear advancement. Each new discovery completely replaces what came before. They have no backup systems, no redundancies, no alternative approaches. Getting some interesting readings from their engine core, Commander Ellis added from navigation. They're redlining their systems, trying to find more power. Their engineers are in a complete panic. They've never had to deal with system failures on this scale. Admiral Mitchell stood from her chair, walking to the center of the bridge. Commander Hayes, show them what happens when you put all your trust in a single system. In the cyber warfare suite, Hayes initiated a carefully prepared sequence. The Zarkak ships' advanced quantum processors, the pride of their civilization, began to shut down one by one. Not through any attack, but through their own operating protocols being used against them. Their entire command structure ran through those processors, Hayes explained over the comm. They never maintained separate systems for critical functions. No mechanical backups, no isolated networks, not even basic hardware failsafes. Lieutenant Cooper's tactical display showed the Zarkak's fleet falling into disorder as their ships lost access to more and more systems. They're running on emergency power now, life support and basic maneuvering only. Dr. Foster had been studying the data streaming in from their disabled opponents. Admiral, you should see this. Their engineers are trying to restart their systems, but they don't even have manual overrides. Everything has to go through their main computer network, which is currently getting a crash course in human cybersecurity principles. Their commander is requesting direct communication, Anderson reported from his station. Audio only. Their holographic systems are offline. The translation software suggests their tone has shifted from condescension to, well, something between terror and fascination. Admiral Mitchell nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. This is the teaching moment, people. Dr. Foster, prepare a full technical package on basic system redundancy and the benefits of maintaining multiple technological paths. Commander Hayes, begin rolling back the cyber restrictions. Gradually. Let's show them how to learn from this experience. As the bridge crew worked to begin a transition from confrontation to education, Mitchell reflected on how many species had to learn this lesson the hard way. Humanity's greatest strength had never been in having the most advanced technology, but in understanding that true advancement meant never abandoning useful tools just because newer ones came along. Let's show them why humans still teach their children to start fires with sticks, she announced to her crew. Even though we can light up cities with fusion power. The bridge of the U.S. deception had transformed. Gone were the fake steam leaks and flickering screens, replaced by the ship's true appearance. A marvel of human engineering that bridged multiple technological eras. Captain Tom Bradley, the ship's diplomatic officer, stood beside Admiral Mitchell as they prepared to make first official contact with the humbled Zarkax fleet. Their commander has agreed to a video conference, Commander Anderson reported, his hands moving across his now pristine communications console. Commander Hayes has verified their systems are clean and running on basic power. No tricks this time. They're actually being honest. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of the Zarkax flagship. Their commander, a tall figure with iridescent scales and multiple eyes, seemed to be fighting between military pride and scientific curiosity. I am High Commander Vex Thor of the Zarkax Confederation. The alien leader began, their translator working perfectly thanks to Hayes' earlier infiltration. You have demonstrated capabilities we did not believe possible. Your ship's design defies all known principles of technological progress. Captain Bradley stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his measured response. High Commander, I am Captain Thomas Bradley, diplomatic officer of the United Earth Ship Deception. And that last statement is precisely why we're here. Dr. Foster's console beeped as she received new data. Admiral, they're scanning us again. But this time they're actually looking at everything, not just what they expect to see. Their energy signatures showed genuine scientific interest rather than military assessment. Bradley continued his dialogue with Vex Thor. Our vessel is not a warship, High Commander. The U.S. Deception is part of humanity's diplomatic contact fleet. We specialize in first contact scenarios with species that might misinterpret technological differences. The Zarkax commander's multiple eyes blinked in succession. A diplomatic vessel. You disabled our entire fleet without firing a single shot. Precisely, Admiral Mitchell interjected, stepping into view. Because the best diplomatic solution is one that prevents war rather than winning it. Every system you've seen in action today was designed with one purpose: to demonstrate that technology isn't a linear path. Lieutenant Cooper's tactical display showed the Zarkax fleet's weapons remaining powered down, their ships now arranged in a more neutral formation. They're repositioning to standard diplomatic configurations. Admiral, looking a lot less threatening now. Captain Bradley gestured to the various systems visible on the bridge. What you see here is humanity's greatest achievement, not any single technology, but the integration of multiple technological approaches. We still use mechanical backups alongside quantum computers. Chemical engines support our fusion drives. Even our communication systems range from radio waves to quantum entanglement. Dr. Foster added her scientific perspective, speaking directly to the Zarkax engineers visible in the background of their bridge. Your quantum processors are actually more advanced than ours in raw processing power, but by focusing solely on advancing one technology path, you've created critical vulnerabilities. Every system needs a backup, preferably several, using different operational principles. The Zarkax engineers could be seen conversing excitedly among themselves, their earlier fear replaced by professional interest. Commander Vexthor's posture had changed too, military rigidity giving way to thoughtful consideration. Your ship, Vexthor observed, it was designed to appear primitive, to test how we would react. Yes, Bradley confirmed. Humanity has learned that how a species responds to perceived technological inferiors says more about them than any official declaration. Your response confirmed our concerns and the need for this lesson. Admiral Mitchell watched as understanding dawned in the alien commander's expression. This isn't about humiliation, High Commander. It's about prevention. Every species must learn that true advancement comes not from abandoning the old, but from finding new ways to use everything at our disposal. As the diplomatic team began sharing details about human technological philosophy, the bridge crew of the Deception could see the first real signs of progress. The Zarkax were beginning to understand that they hadn't been defeated. They'd been given an opportunity to learn one of the most important lessons in galactic civilization. Chief Engineer Mike Roberts led the delegation of wide-eyed Zarkax engineers through the U.S. Deception's engine room, taking pride in their increasingly enthusiastic questions. What had started as a tense technical inspection had evolved into something closer to an excited school field trip. "This is what we call our hybrid drive section," Roberts explained, gesturing to the massive engineering bay. "Notice how the quantum fusion core is supplemented by standard chemical thrusters. Each system can operate independently, but they work best in concert." One of the Zarkax engineers, their scale plates shimmering with excitement, pointed to a series of mechanical gauges along the wall. "These are analog measuring devices, but you have quantum sensors." Roberts smiled, running his hand along the brass and steel instruments. "Sometimes the old ways are the most reliable. These gauges will still be working if we lose power to every digital system on the ship. They've saved lives more than once." Up on the bridge, Admiral Mitchell and Captain Bradley were engaged in a similar educational exchange with High Commander Vexthor and their senior staff. "Your approach to technology is unprecedented," Vexthor admitted, their multiple eyes fixed on a display showing the Deception's layered defense systems. "We had always assumed that progress meant replacing the old with the new." Dr. Foster, who had joined the bridge discussion, brought up a historical display. "Humanity learned this lesson the hard way. We once had a similar philosophy to yours. Then we faced challenges that made us realize the value of maintaining multiple technological paths." "Tell me about these challenges," Vexthor requested, their translator conveying genuine curiosity. Captain Bradley nodded to Commander Hayes, who had come up from the cyber warfare suite. She brought up a series of historical images on the main screen. Solar flares, quantum cascade failures, electromagnetic pulse weapons, Hayes listed, each disaster appearing in turn. "Every time we thought we had the perfect system, something would come along to prove us wrong. So we started building redundancy not just into our systems, but into our entire technological approach." Lieutenant Cooper, still at his tactical station, added his perspective. "That's why our point defense grid uses everything from laser interceptors to conventional flak. If one system fails, the others pick up the slack. No single point of failure." The Zarkax military officers in the room shifted uncomfortably at this reminder of their recent defeat, but their scientific curiosity was clearly winning out over their wounded pride. "Your ship's name, Deception," one of the Zarkax officers ventured. "It was chosen with purpose." Admiral Mitchell nodded. "All our first contact vessels have names that reflect their mission. Deception, understanding, patience, wisdom. They're reminders that true strength often lies in restraint rather than power." Down in engineering, Roberts was showing the Zarkax team something that had them particularly fascinated. A manual control center with physical levers and buttons. You can control a quantum drive. Mechanically, one engineer asked in disbelief. Not as efficiently as with the main computer, Roberts admitted, but it works. And sometimes, working is better than perfect. We call it the better-than-nothing principle. Back on the bridge, Dr. Foster was deep in technical discussion with the Zarkak science officer. Your quantum processors are truly remarkable, she said. With some basic security protocols and proper backup systems, they could be even more effective. And you would share this knowledge? The science officer asked cautiously. Captain Bradley stepped in. That's the other lesson we hope to teach. Progress isn't a zero-sum game. When species share knowledge, everyone benefits. Admiral Mitchell watched as understanding continued to spread through the Zarkak's delegation. What had started as a forced lesson was becoming a genuine exchange of ideas. The Zarkaks were beginning to see that their technological superiority in some areas didn't make their approach superior in all areas. Perhaps, Vex Thor said thoughtfully, it is time for the Confederation to reconsider some of our basic assumptions about progress. 3 days later, the U.S. Deception orbited the Zarkak's primary space station alongside the once hostile fleet. The bridge hummed with activity as final preparations were made for the first official technology exchange program between the two species. The last group of Zarkak's engineers just transported back to their ship. Commander Anderson reported, checking his communications display. They're still buzzing about the mechanical backup systems. Apparently, they're already drawing up plans to implement similar redundancies in their own vessels. Admiral Mitchell stood at the center of the bridge, reading through the final draft of the exchange agreement on her tablet. Dr. Foster, how are their integration plans looking? Promising, Admiral, Foster replied, her expression bright with professional satisfaction. They're taking a measured approach, starting with basic mechanical backups for critical systems before moving on to more complex implementations. They're learning the value of small steps. Lieutenant Cooper's tactical display showed the Zarkak ships in a newly modified formation, one that incorporated some of the defensive principles they'd learned from the Deception's crew. They're quick studies, I'll give them that. Their fleet movements already show more flexibility. Captain Bradley entered the bridge, having just returned from a final meeting with High Commander Vex Thor. The education goes both ways. Admiral, their quantum processing architecture could revolutionize our own computing systems once we help them add proper security protocols. Of course. Speaking of security, Commander Hayes called from her station. The Zarkak cyber defense team has been incredibly receptive to our suggestions. They're already implementing multiple independent networks and analog backups. They've even started developing their own hybrid systems. Chief Engineer Roberts' voice came through the comm, carrying his characteristic mix of pride and amusement. You should see their engineering teams. Admiral, they're like kids in a candy store. Yesterday, I caught 2 of them taking apart an old-style mechanical chronometer just to see how it worked. Dr. Foster brought up a new display, showing the technical exchange statistics. The most fascinating part is how they're applying their advanced understanding of quantum mechanics to improve some of our primitive technologies. They're not just adding backup systems, they're creating entirely new hybrid technologies. That's the real victory here, Admiral Mitchell observed, looking around at her crew. Not just teaching them our way of doing things, but helping them find their own path to technological wisdom. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission from Vex Thor's flagship. The Zarkak's commander's bearing had changed dramatically over the past few days, the rigid military posture replaced by the eager energy of a fellow explorer. Admiral Mitchell, Vex Thor greeted, their translator now perfectly calibrated. Our council has just approved the exchange program. We're already receiving requests from other Confederation worlds to participate. It seems your lesson has sparked quite the revolution in our technological philosophy. Glad to hear it, High Commander, Mitchell replied with a warm smile. Remember, this is just the beginning. True progress takes time, patience, and the wisdom to learn from every approach. Indeed, Vexthor agreed. We've already begun incorporating these principles into our first contact protocols. No more assumptions about technological superiority. Instead, we look for what we can learn from each new species we encounter. As the final preparations were made for the Deception's departure, Admiral Mitchell gathered her senior staff for one last observation of their success. The Zarkak's fleet had been transformed, not just in their technology, but in their understanding of what progress really meant. You know what the best part is? Cooper asked, breaking the contemplative silence. They're already talking about building their own version of the Deception. A first contact vessel that bridges the gap between advanced and basic technology. That's how real change happens, Captain Bradley observed. Not through force, but through understanding. Not through replacement, but through integration. As the U.S. Deception prepared to break orbit, Admiral Mitchell looked at the message being transmitted from the Zarkak's fleet. It was written in both their languages, using both quantum encoding and simple radio waves. Safe journey, teachers. May our paths cross again in peace. The mission was complete, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy for generations to come. The Zarkaks had learned that true advancement wasn't about abandoning the old or forcing change. It was about finding the wisdom to see value in every step of the journey.